Before we get started, I just wanted to say that this podcast is brought to you by Fuelin, the best nutrition and fueling app there is out there on the market right now that really takes away all the guesswork and simplifies everything for you to perform and feel your best. So please check it out on fuelin.com. They're the reason this show can keep going. Hey everybody, welcome back to The Daily Try. Today I am so lucky to have on a very special guest with one of the most impressive bios I've ever had to read. So Dr. Jim Taylor holds a Ph.D. in psychology and works with professional and age group triathletes across the world. He's the author of 19 books and his blog posts have been viewed by millions of people. Dr. Jim is no slouch as an athlete either. He's a former world-ranked ski racer, a second-degree black belt in karate, a sub-3-hour marathoner and an Ironman triathlete, an age group national champion, and two-time world champion medalist. So, Dr. Jim, thank you so much for joining me. You are headed to Ponte Vedra to take part in the World Championships coming up here soon. And,
I am.
So you're busy. Thank you for taking time to talk to me, and there's so much we can learn from you, so I'm really excited.
Sure. Happy to be here. I'm a big fan of The Daily Try. I watch it frequently and always keep up with the news by watching you. So I think you're a great new addition to the triathlon community. So appreciate all you do.
Thank you for that. I really appreciate that. When we met in Milwaukee, I could tell how much a fan of the pro racing you were too, because we were both right there at the swim start, getting really excited for them to go. That's why I'm so excited to have you on, because there's so much I want to hear from your perspective about pro athletes. And it's championship season. And these pro athletes have a championship mindset, I have to think, being able to do all that they do. That leads me to my first big question. What makes them able to do what they're able to do? Why are the pros so good?
Yeah, Travis, it's a question that I'm asked constantly, and I have sort of two answers to that. The first thing is we tend to think of professional triathletes and professional athletes in general as superheroes, as like somehow superhuman.
Yeah.
But having worked with many and met many additional ones, they're not. They're human beings just like the rest of us. And they struggle with the same kind of challenges that we do. And we obviously heard from Chelsea Sodaro talking about her challenges. And I see it in many other sports that they are human, but they also have one thing that makes them a little different. They're genetic freaks. and you can have all the metal stuff in the world, you can have all the fastest bikes, all the data, but if you don't have the genetics to swim, bike, and run really fast, none of it matters. So certainly they have a lot of those physical gifts, but that's not enough, obviously, because the world is full of can't miss kids who missed, or gifted failures gifted people who fail. So they also have to do the work. They have to have the opportunities. They have to have the support community around them, because it takes a village to raise a world-class and professional athlete. And they ultimately have to have the mindset. And what's interesting, Travis, is that everybody says the mind is so important. Many will say it's more important. And given what I do for a living, I don't even think it's more important, because you might have the greatest mindset in the world, but if you're not physically capable of going the distance, it doesn't matter. But at the highest level, and even at any age group level, like the one where I'm at, often it comes down to the mind, because they are all in incredible physical condition. They all have great technique in the different events. They all do the proper nutrition and race planning and coaching and all that stuff. So on race day, it's like, who is ready physiologically and who can put it all together under the pressure of race day. And we just saw Latte Finland, the 70.3 Worlds, and then Nice, the Ironman men's World Championships. And those are the biggies for the long distance guys for sure. And Ponte Vedra coming up for the short course guys and gals as well.
Oh yeah, you touched on a lot of good points there. I think the one I want to move on to is the support system, and how important is that? I feel like a lot of us age group athletes don't quite have that, and we're just kind of blazing our own trail. But how important, for example, we saw Sam Laidlow, and he's working with his father and his family are all behind him. How important is that to those pro athletes?
Yeah, it's really, really important at any level, really, because triathlon is a sport that in a way you can't do it alone, because you can't be an expert in all the different areas that impact triathlon training and performance, whether it's swim technique or power data on the bike or any other aspect of triathlon. Nutrition, obviously, sports psychology, mental training is important, although that still hasn't quite sunk in all the way across our triathlon community. And so it's really important for them to have the right people in place. Plus family and friends who can help guide them in terms of keeping perspective, keeping them grounded. And that's one thing I have to hand it to Sam Laidlaw. I've seen a tremendous growth in him as a competitor and as a person over the last year. And the sense I've gotten is that his family has really grounded him. And you can be at the very top. But again, you're still a person and you still have to get along with people and you still want to be able to have people supporting you. So having that team around you is so important. And, at the highest level, everybody has a team of people who support them in some way.
So then how do you, as a psychologist and working with these pro athletes, how do you support them through what you do?
Yeah. So again, everybody says that the mind is so important, but not a lot is done about it. But here's an important thing to recognize. So all triathletes, from the highest level up to age groupers, do mental stuff, meaning they try to motivate themselves. They build their confidence and stay positive. They try to relax before races. They try to stay focused on their workouts rather than thinking about results and things like that. But mental stuff is different than mental training. Just like if you use this as an example for conditioning, going to the gym every 3 weeks and doing arm curls, that's not physical conditioning, that's physical stuff. And so one thing I do is I create a program. So there are things they're doing, because triathletes are doers, Travis. They want stuff to do to get better. Yeah. And so I don't lay them on the couch and shrink them. I do a little bit of that because sometimes this is probably a later conversation, because sometimes unconscious things from their past can impact how they perform in the present. But for the most part, I give them tools they can use. I use a metaphor of having mental muscles. And mental muscles can be weak, they can be strong, and they can be injured. So what I do with athletes is give them exercises and tools they can use to strengthen those muscles in training. And then on race day, or leading up to a race, getting them mentally prepared and fine-tuned so their engine, their physical engine, can put out the highest level of performance in the race. So a lot of it's creating structure, giving them a way of thinking about the fact that the mental side is pretty foggy. Like if I want to see how strong somebody is, I put them on a bike, see what their power is. If I want to see how strong they are in the gym, we see how many plates they can put on the end of a bar. So they can touch it, they can see it, they can feel it. With mental stuff, it's like confidence. Yeah, it's like what you think, how you feel, focus, all these things. But so I try to make it as tangible as possible. And one last point to your question is that a lot of times people don't really have a deep understanding of all the mental stuff and also all the mental training and all the mental ideas. And so I give them a vocabulary. So they may come to me and say, like, I'm feeling this way. And then I'll say, like, it sounds to me like this. And as soon as you give somebody a label and an understanding, then they can wrap their arms around it and they can do something about it. Because otherwise it's like their mind is not working for them, but I have no idea what to do. And so I try to give them a sense of, you have the power to control the way you think, the way you feel, and the way you perform.
It sounds like it's pretty individualized, but it also sounds like there's a lot of things perhaps that work for everybody.
Yes. So there's a foundation of knowledge and tools that everybody can benefit from. And whether it's ways to build confidence or to relax or to stay focused, using mental imagery, visualization, the most powerful mental tool, self-talk, routines. There's some basics that everybody can apply. At the same time, when you get to the highest level, it's very personalized. Because the fact is, if I take an age grouper who's middle of the pack and I have them do it, I can pretty much have them do anything and they'll improve. Because here's the ceiling and here's them. So there's a lot of room for improvement. Sure. But what do you take a guy or a gal who is, top 30 in the world, or maybe a new pro, or even top 5 in the world? How do you get them to that last bit? Because they're already unbelievably good.
Yeah.
And so what I talk about is having what I call mental marginal gains. So, when they get in the wind tunnel, they're not looking for, a 50-watt gain in their power, because they're already putting out 350 or whatever.
Yeah.
Over the long distance. They're looking for 3 to 5 little bits of marginal gains in different areas. And so I try to use that metaphor the same way with their mental training, that if I can get you to go 0.5% faster over the course of an Ironman, If you do the math, it's significant. And yes, Sam won pretty definitively in Nice, but very often it's much closer than that, and it can make a big difference. So it's looking for the fine tuning, the little touches that can help a top level athlete get that little bit better that makes the difference.
That's amazing. It's interesting you brought that up because I heard Sam Laidlow's socks that he spent the extra time to put in transition saved him maybe 8 watts, which would have been 5 or 6 minutes over the course of the race. So it sounds like, just putting in that extra bit of work on your mind could save you a lot in the long run. So could you share with me some practical ways that you do this? Some ways that you help your clients?
Yeah, sure. So for example, really looking at what they say to themselves, their self-talk in training, especially hard workouts, and then in races. Even the best triathletes in the world go to the dark side. I don't know if you're a Star Wars fan, but they go to the dark side, and where they sort of go against themselves. They become their own worst enemy. And so really training. So self-talk is a tool. And with the tools, you have to learn how to use them. And the way you use them is in training. So you never start doing mental things when you get to the race. It's too late. It's a matter of developing different habits, different ways of thinking, different ways of dealing with your physiology, your psychology, and your emotions. And you start to do that in training. So during a hard workout, your body is basically yelling at your mind going, we can stop now. This really hurts. And if your mind listens, you're going to slow down or stop. And so it's really important to train your mind to control your body. And that comes from being in those tough situations where it's a hard indoor bike workout and you're pushing major wattage for a long time and you're dying there. Your RPE is 8 or 9 or 10.
Yeah.
But that's when it really matters, and that's where you make the gains. So the ability to push through that. So I'm going to give you probably the simplest tip that I came across, not from my professional life, but from my own training experience. I was doing a workout of like a 6 by 4 minutes at 90% of my FTP, and I'm not going to tell you what it is because it's not super high, but
it's all relative.
But I noticed that toward the last minute of the first couple of 4-minute intervals, my power would start to drop, and because I was hurting. And I just couldn't get my power back up or even to maintain. And then I had this epiphany, and I go, you know what? I'm choosing to be here in pain. This is my choice. So, and do you know what happened to my wattage? It went up. Right. And so I used that the next couple of intervals, and I was able to, when I got to 3 minutes, I started kicking this idea in. I choose to push my limits. I choose to push my limits. That was my mantra. And you know what? My power stayed even. And I've been using that consistently for I discovered it probably 6 months ago. And I've been sharing it with my pro triathletes and also my age groupers. And just a simple act of saying to yourself, to your body, to your primitive brain, I choose to do this. That's a couple of benefits. That means I'm owning it and I have control of it. And a big reason why our bodies start to slow down is because our primitive brain thinks that we're going to die, basically, because we're in pain. And so even though we have this part of our brain called the cerebral cortex that makes us evolved beings, we still react to the world very much like we did on the Serengeti 250,000 years ago when we were cave people, like animals. Yes. Unfortunately, what worked then, slowing down because we were going to die, doesn't work in 2023 triathlon life, because you need to keep pushing through it to make the gains.
Yeah.
And so by simply saying this, I choose to push my limits. That sends a signal to your primitive brain and your body that we're in control, that I'm choosing to do this. So you don't need to do anything to slow us down. We can still keep going. And so that's a really practical, simple thing, but there's obviously a ton more, and I can share a couple more if you want.
Yeah. I mean, that's amazing. I feel like, do you think that takes a lot of practice to, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Think of it this way.
Yeah.
Our primitive brains have been doing things to ensure our survival for 250 million years. Our evolved brain has only been around for about 250,000 years. So I jokingly, but sort of seriously, tell people that when you're retraining your brain, you're resisting $250 million years, sorry, of evolution. And so that's a challenge. And people come to me often. I get calls like 2 weeks before Ironman. Can you get me ready?
Yeah.
And like Travis, I think I'm pretty good at what I do, but I
Nice.
don't do magic.
Yeah.
And mental training is just like physical training. You wouldn't go to a conditioning coach 2 weeks before an Ironman and say, "Can you get me ready?" That's absurd.
Yeah. Good
And
point.
so it takes practice, it takes time, it takes repetition, it takes commitment.
Hmm. But I'm sure you've seen so much success from the people you work with. Is that true?
Well,
Yeah. Hmm.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I've certainly had a lot of successes, but it doesn't
Yeah.
always work because there are
Sure.
so many things that contribute to high
Hmm.
level performance. So I don't take credit for successes when somebody does great. I don't take blame for failures because it could be mental that they got better. It might not be. It might maybe they just got stronger and maybe they would have done well without me. I don't know. But I've been doing this for a long time, and people seem to keep coming back to me and valuing me. So I like to think I help them.
I love that. Well, okay. Before, because I'm going to ask you so many more of those, especially relating to us age groupers. But back to the pros. One thing I've been thinking about is, for example, Sam Lalo won at 24 years old. That's so young, youngest ever to win. What makes a guy like him last in the sport to be like Jan? And what makes, for example, Jan have such an amazing career and to still have that fire burning at 42 years old? Are there some tricks you've seen and just lessons that people can learn for their mind to get ready for a long career like that?
Sure. Well, two things. Let's talk short career then long career. One
Okay.
thing we've seen over the last couple of years, Travis, both in triathlon and cycling, is a lot of really young athletes. So the Pogacas, the Vingegaards, these guys are 22, 23, winning the Tour de France. And we're seeing the Laidlaws and the Detlevs and a lot of these younger guys in triathlon having a lot of success.
Yeah.
Whereas it used to be that you need to do Kona like 5, 6 times until you could finally figure it out.
Yeah.
Well, Gustav Eden clearly proved that not to be the case. And so development, I think what's happened is, first of all, the training technology and training techniques have advanced so much that it doesn't take 5, 10 years to develop the level of fitness to go the distance.
Hmm.
And so younger guys are just getting fitter faster.
Hmm.
And also, I think, again, technology and data has made it so to be unbelievably precise in the development of all their physiological systems.
Yep.
So that plays a role. Also, I mean, we tend to look at the really young ones, but there are a lot of really great older triathletes at the pro level.
Yeah.
So a lot of athletes develop in different ways. So there are sort of prodigies like a Laidlaw, a Ditlev, or so on, who they were just obviously, like I talked about, they've got great genes and they started early.
Hmm.
And for a lot of these guys like Blumenfeld, like Eden, and some of these younger guys, they've been doing this since they were 12, 13 years old.
Yeah.
Whereas in the past, you didn't have many triathletes growing up to be triathletes. They were either swimmers or runners or bikers, and they transitioned to it later. And
Hmm.
so it took a while for them to get those skills. And so I think, first of all, the fact that we're getting some really gifted athletes coming into our sport, and they're starting early. So they're already laying that foundation. They've been at it at a young age. By the way, Formula One is another sport where you're getting 20, Max Verstappen was winning runs at 18.
Yeah.
But he started when he was like 5.
Hmm.
And so that's a short perspective in terms of early careers. Later on, fundamentally, what enables a Jan Frodeno to be really successful is, and other older triathletes, one is they stay healthy.
Hmm.
And the fact that is the number one thing. All the mental stuff in the world doesn't mean a thing if you can't stay healthy. And the fact is, especially long distance, it is really tough on the body. And Jan's had his challenges the last couple of years, and yet he came back from it. And we're seeing that with a number of other athletes who have struggled with injuries. And we don't hear about the ones who sort of they weren't quite famous enough, so we didn't really notice that they left the sport. So certainly staying healthy is really important. And as they get older, they have to manage their training more. So maybe they can't have quite the volume, or they have to have more recovery, or whatever it might be. But what enables athletes like the TOs, the Tim O'Donnells, or the Andy Hougs, or Daniel Reifs, or the Jan Frodenos to last is the passion, the fire is still there. If you don't have that, it's too hard.
Yeah.
Go out there every day for hours a day as a pro and put in the time and burn the energy and feel the discomfort. So, and that's not something that can be taught. It can be uncovered, because I've worked with some athletes over the years who are tremendously talented, but they never put in the work. And I help them find their purpose, their passion. And because it's in there, it's for all of us. And so a lot of times athletes will come to me because they'll say, I lost my motivation.
Yeah.
And but I think that's the wrong way to think about it. So when you think about lost the motivation, it's like, oh, is it under my desk? Is it behind the sofa?
Yeah.
Where is it?
Yeah.
But for me, rarely is it the motivation's been lost. It's that it's being suppressed in some way. And with younger athletes, it's maybe too much pressure from their parents, or for pro triathletes, it's too much pressure from social media, from sponsors, from partially it's related to physiology. I'm a big believer that our psychology is affected by our physiology. So last weekend, I'm obviously starting to taper for Ponte Vedra next week, and on Saturday I get up and I couldn't get myself to do anything. I was supposed to go for a long ride and then an off the bike run, and I'm a motivated guy, and and Saturday and Sunday I literally couldn't get myself to do anything, even like a half-hour bike ride on my indoor trainer. Couldn't do anything.
Yeah,
I just no motivation, and I've learned over time that my body is talking to me, and so I took the weekend off, and I came back Monday, and then this last week. And I've got the fire back, and I've been training hard, and I'm super psyched for doing the best I can in Ponte Vedra. So,
oh, amazing! Actually, I'm so glad you said that, because I feel like when I talk to somebody like you, I feel like that wouldn't happen to you. You know, you're the championship mindset guy. I'm that's for me on my Saturday mornings, not for you. But
yeah, well, it's a funny thing because I've got a series of articles on my blog that I call I practice what I preach. And one of the bad things about what I do, or one of the good things, I suppose, is that I have to practice what I preach, right? And but at the same time, it's easy to tell other people how to have that great mindset. But I'm a human being, and I struggle for the same challenges as everybody else, just like the pros. I put on my tri kit, just like Jan puts on his tri kit, one leg at a time. And so just because you know this stuff intellectually doesn't mean it translates into, sometimes I get bummed out, and sometimes I get disappointed, and sometimes I focus on results too much, because in addition to being a mental coach, I'm also a highly competitive guy, and that's one reason I do triathlons. I'm not in it just to participate, that's for sure.
Well, to go back just a little bit to something you mentioned, back with purpose and stuff like that, I was wondering how much emphasis you focus on with goal setting, for example. Is that a big part for you as well?
Yeah. So here's an interesting thing. So goal setting is probably one of the most researched areas of sports psychology, and it's all into the business world, into other areas. And one thing is very clear, that if you're more likely to perform better if you have clearly defined goals. But with the kind of athletes that are attracted to me and my work, they already have a clear idea about where they want to go. Okay. And so it's less about sort of like outcome goals, and more about just what they need to do day to day. And so it's less goals than like just having a training program and a coach who, if you're age grouper, to give you the program. But goals are certainly helpful, especially if you don't know where you're going and you don't know how to get there. But here's an interesting thing. So many years ago, early in my career, I was fortunate to work with an Olympic sprinter, 100-meter guy. And the classic thing a young sports psychology person does is sits down and says, like, what are your goals? And he goes, Jim, I don't have goals. I'm going like, what? How can you not have goals? He said this: I'm trying to run faster than anybody has ever run. And so for him, goals were like a ceiling, a limiter. Yeah. And so he says, you know what? I don't talk about goals. I talk about dreams. And so what he did, this is what he did. He said, I open up that ceiling of goals, and the sky's the limit. And there are a couple of powerful things about this. First of all, I love this idea that goals have that ceiling, and he's trying to go someplace that you can't imagine going someplace that doesn't exist yet. But also, goals are about intellect. It's about thinking about it. But dreams are about feelings. And the ultimate piece that I emphasize in my work with especially with pros, because that's that last little bit, but also with age groupers, is getting it's the emotions, because emotions are what fuel us. They've evolved to motivate us to do something. And so fear, run away; anger, fight; disappointment, persist; frustration, overcome obstacles. And so I've been spending a lot of time this past year, especially with the pros that I work with, talking about what fuels them, because I want them to be fueled by 100% pure rocket fuel.
Yeah.
And the problem is that as human beings, we sometimes are run on contaminated fuel. And contaminated fuel might be perfectionism, fear of failure, need for control, need to please others. Now, the problem with this kind of fuel is it can get you partially where you want to go, like perfectionism. It's a real motivator because you're motivated out of fear that you won't be perfect, or fear of failure that you might fail. But you get to a point where this contaminated fuel holds you back. Because with many types of this contaminated fuel, it's grounded in fear of failure. And so what happens is people with this kind of contaminated fuel, they are unwilling to take risks. And one thing I loved about Sam Laidlow in last year at the World Championships, he was fearless.
Yeah.
I mean, he had no idea whether he could finish by crushing, the bike and running hard off the bike out of T2. But he just freaking went for it and didn't quite work out. I mean, second's not bad, but he did it again in Nice, and it worked. And so the idea is to get to the start line and go like, I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm just going for it. And that, of course, doesn't mean if with an Ironman sprinting the entire way.
Yeah.
But whatever the plan is, keeping pushing. So a lot of my work is getting rid of the contaminated fuel and just figuring out what's your rocket fuel. And passion is a part of it. Purpose, like, why am I doing this? Am I doing it for the results? Contaminated fuel. Am I doing it to be rich and famous? Contaminated fuel. Am I doing this because I can't not do it? This is it. This is what it's all about in a way. That you do it because to not do it would be inconsistent with who you are as a person. You can't not do the work. You can't not put yourself out there with the possibility that at mile 20 you might blow up.
Yeah.
And when you're liberated in that way, and in the tank is this rocket fuel, you might not win. You might be a middle of the pack age grouper, but it doesn't matter because that's not the goal. Even for the top pros, yes, they want to win, they want to make money and all those things. But a couple of years ago, after the Olympics, one of the athletes who won a gold medal called me up after, who I worked with, called me up, and for 20 minutes she's telling me about her experience. And she goes, I love the people in the village, meeting the athletes in other sports, collecting the pins, my preparation, the race was super fun. And then she just finishes and there's like a silence. And I go, and you won the gold medal? And she goes, oh yeah, that too. Eesh. Yeah. And so even at the highest level, they don't do it for that. That's like icing on the cake. It's sort of validation, but it's not the reason for doing it.
That's a good attitude. Yeah. All right. On that then, how important do you think it is for someone like Frodeno, for example, and Alistair Brownlee, two I can think of, that they have these other passions that are outside of themselves? For example, Frodeno has the Frodeno Fund where he makes those pump tracks. Alistair Brownlee is the Brownlee Foundation. Do you think that's something like that's super important to have, as maybe another reason why you're doing this outside of yourself? Yeah.
So that goes to life balance. Okay. And let me start by saying this, that striving to be your best in anything, you cannot live a balanced life. You just can't, because you have to devote so much time to that one particular area, such as triathlon, such as school, such as career, such as kids, whatever it might be. Yeah. But I was saying that it's important to have balance within the imbalance, especially as you get older. So, Jan and Alistair weren't doing this when they were in their early 20s or their late 20s. Yeah. And I think that early on, it can be beneficial to be just single-minded, because you need to do everything you can to get to that level, and it's hard to get to that level. But as you get older, I find some balance helps, because I think as you get older, you mature, you have sort of broader needs. It's not all about the training. Having being married or having a partner, having kids, having other kind of things like philanthropic stuff, like those guys, Fredano and Alistair do. And so those they take some of the pressure off in a way, because you clearly, as you well know, have to be invested in triathlon. You have to care about it.
Yeah.
If you're overly invested, if that's the only place you get satisfaction and meaning and joy, if you have a bad training day, or you get injured, or you have a bad race, that's an incredible threat. That's an incredible blow. Whereas if you're still, a spouse or partner, or you have, I'm still a father, or I've got my foundation to focus on, then it's not quite as devastating.
Yeah.
And so I spend a lot of time with athletes who care so deeply about their sport. And that, again, that drives them to success to a point.
Yeah.
But when they become overly invested, when they enter what I call the two zone, one of the most dangerous words in life, and for that matter, much less triathlon and sport, is TOO, two.
Okay.
Go into the two zone. And the two zone is when it becomes too important to you, when you care too much, when your self-esteem, your self-identity are too connected with how you perform. That can get in the way. So there are certainly some athletes who need that single-minded focus, others who need to spread it out a little bit more. But ultimately, all the athletes I've worked with over the years, they ultimately move to a place of some semblance of balance in an otherwise imbalanced life.
Oh, it's really good that you said that, because I asked a lot of my guests, a lot of the pro athletes, like, how do they find balance? A lot of them are doing not just triathlon just to make ends meet, so it's good to hear that, sometimes life it doesn't need to be in balance if you want to get to a certain area. All right, then that's actually a good way to segue onto short course racing and short course athletes, because I'm sure a lot of their lives are really not in balance, and they are under so many different pressures, and you're heading to Pontevedra to race and to see the grand final of those short course athletes. What kind of pressures do you think they're dealing with, and how to overcome like such tough pressures that they're under? For example, they're with federations, they're away from families, they're so young. What are some tips for younger athletes under so much pressure?
Yeah. Well, first of all, one of the tough things about the short course athletes is they have less control, because they are at the mercy, if you will, of their federations. And we saw this with Gustav not getting a slot for the Paris test event, even though he was higher ranked than the lower ranked guy. And I haven't heard, maybe you get the inside scoop better than I do, but clearly something was going on there.
Yeah.
And it's certainly been a tough year for Gustav. I was staying in the same hotel as he was in Hamburg at the World Championships there, and we talked a little bit. And his mom died, and he's had injuries, and he blew up in Singapore, and he didn't get into the test event, and so I absolutely empathize with him. At the same time, I think it's a great lesson that even for the best, they struggle, and there are some tough times. But so the federation issue is certainly one. Second of all, it's interesting that there are also so many different leagues and race series that they have to address. There's the World Cups and the WTCS and Super League and Arena Games, and PTO is sort of a little bit in the middle, I suppose. But it's hard to balance all that. And obviously a ton of traveling, and Blumenfeld was like the epitome of that, with his wild adventure of going to Paris and then Singapore, and before that Milwaukee, and then going up to Latte and getting sick from the water and all these other things. But that's certainly a challenge, and I think also just you're more fixed by schedule. Whereas long course guys, they can go to a lot of different races. They can go to PTO, they can go to Ironman, they can go to Clash, they can go to challenge events, and so they can pick and choose. Whereas there's like a tip of the arrow for the short course people, and that's obviously the Olympics. And there's a lot of pressure to qualify, and then to stay sharp for that. And I find what's interesting, Travis, is that it doesn't seem that difficult for short course racers to move up to long course endurance, but it's hard to go back down unless you're named Taylor Knibb. And so we're seeing that with Gustav, and Christian is showing some signs of being able to come back down and have speed. But I think the big thing is for short course racers, and this is what I am now after I did Ironmans in 70.3s when I was younger, is really focus on staying healthy, and choosing your events wisely,
Hmm.
and prioritizing the ones that wisely, and making sure that you have all the support you need to be able to stay focused and just focus on what you need to do to go fast. Because ultimately, that's what matters. Because if you think about it, Travis, triathlons is a very complex sport. I mean, there are 3 different events. There's equipment, there's physiology, there's psychology, there's nutrition. We also can take it from complex to complicated. And that's where you add in the contaminated fuel and a lot of stuff with pressures and worries and stress and social media and things like that. But fundamentally, triathlon is simple.
Hmm.
You get to the line and you swim, bike, and run as fast as you can. That's it. That's it. That should be the only thing in your mind when you get when you jump into the water or start in the water, whatever. Yeah.
So when you're working with people again, do you come up with like a mindset plan for going to the race? Okay.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's totally individual based upon different personalities
Okay.
and different needs. For some, I say lock yourself in your hotel room.
Okay.
For others, I say get out there amongst the people and enjoy it.
Hmm.
And so for some, it's like be super serious. Others have a good time.
Hmm.
So and then of course within that, having a really clearly defined routine. So I'm a big believer in routines because however different a venue is, the water is, the course is, the weather is, the people are, if you have a routine, that sends signals to your mind and your body that this is just another race.
Hmm.
And plus with a routine, everything in routine serves a specific purpose to get yourself physically, mentally, equipmentally, nutritionally ready to do your best. And again, there's no one cookie cutter mold for routines. So I spent a lot of time, the week before, days before when you get to the venue, and then, night before, day of. And again, I practice what I preach. I'm leaving on Monday for Ponte Vedra, and there are certain things I do over the weekend to get myself ready to make sure I don't forget anything.
Yeah.
And then once I get there, I've got 2 days before Super Sprint. I very clearly laid out what I do there and what I don't do. And so here's a little personal thing. I don't do the Parade of Nations, the pasta party, because
Okay.
I'm laying in bed.
Love it.
And so I'm doing what works best for me. Other people have different needs. They love being social. I'm an introvert. And so I just like doing my own thing. But other people like all the pageantry. I'm not there for the pageantry. And so I'll power to the people who are, that's fine. But it's a matter of figuring out like what's best for you. And here's another interesting thought that I spend a lot of time with my triathletes that I work with is what makes the pros so good is that they figured out what works for them in every aspect of their preparations. And then they do that consistently. And so a lot of time I spend, again, with the pros or with the age groupers is I ask them, what works for you? And a lot of them don't know.
Yeah.
And so I help them figure it out. And then I say, do that for every race, every training session, everything, because that consistency ensures proper preparation. It ensures full development in fitness and so on, physical or mental, and it gives confidence. And it gives a sense of control. And the one thing that we humans like is we like to feel in control.
Yeah.
And so if you're doing your routine, it's like, I got this, baby.
Hmm.
Whatever, chaos going around you. But as long as you're doing anything, it's like, yeah, this is comfortable for me.
I love that. One of the big questions I had on that I was going to ask you was to do with nerves. I've known a lot of fellow competitors and friends who just suffer with really bad nerves. My dad, he's been doing these races with me too. He gets pretty nervous as well. But what you have just been talking about sounds like that is probably one of the biggest things people can do to help with nerves before a race.
Yeah. So anxiety is obviously something that most triathletes struggle with, even at the highest level. And I like to reframe that, though. I use the word intensity. And there's this range of intensity from 1 like sleep to 10 of like super excited. And then there's actually another range of 11 to, I do a 1 to 10 scale. And then 11 to 15 is where it goes into anxiety, meaning bad intensity, bad physiological activation. And so the thing is that there's no one ideal level of intensity. So you'll see some pros like, and we saw this in Milwaukee, standing 5 feet from the pros, that some are like jumping up and down and being really active. They're high intensity. Others kind of medium. Others sort of super chill.
Yeah.
And now, were any of them bad nervous? I don't know for sure, but the chances are, if you're at that level, you've probably got that part down pretty well.
Yeah.
So it's more about dialing in that ideal level of intensity. Because again, Travis, we are physiological beings, and if our bodies aren't at that ideal level that enable us to do our thing the best we can, then we're not going to perform as well. And again, it's very personal. Another thing, it depends upon the event. Now, super sprint, you're not going to be just sitting around like a noodle.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you jump in the swim. And as Lionel said when he talked about when he did arena games, he had a great segment where he did a simulation. And he said it was way harder than an Ironman. First of all, that's a whole other discussion. But he said that a mistake he made was that he didn't get activated before he got in the pool, and so he experienced hypoxia. And so your body needs to be ready for what hits them. Yeah. And so shorter courses, you need to be more activated because as soon as you get in the water and swim, pedal to the metal. And you don't want to be going from, like, I think of drag racing, like when they're at the line, they're not idling at 1,000 RPMs. And then all of a sudden they hit the gas and they get to 10,000. That they explode. What they're doing is they're at like 7,000 or 8,000 revving their engine. And so it's easier to get up to 10,000. The other end of the spectrum, of course, is Ironman, where if you're like super, super intense, you're burning fuel.
True. So
you got to be much more relaxed. And then you need to, what Ironman is about portioning out the energy you have, the amount of fuel you have in your tank. And yes, you refuel along the way, but at some point you just run out of gas. And so that idea of anxiety is really about managing your activation and your intensity. At the same time, there's a reason why people get nervous.
Okay.
So I can certainly give triathletes tools they can use to relax. Breathe, center themselves, positive self-talk, listening to relaxing music, practical tools. But what I will do beyond that when I'm working with somebody is figure out, why do you get nervous? Because anxiety is a threat response. It's a primitive threat response. So on the Serengeti 250,000 years ago, a rival tribesman with a really big club, or a saber-toothed tiger. I don't know if saber-toothed tigers actually existed then, but let's just go with that.
Sure.
A little historical license there. So then you want that activation, that anxiety, because it's a threat to your life. Now, sadly, people do die in triathlon occasionally, but for the most part, you're not going to die simply by doing a triathlon.
Yeah.
But our primitive brain doesn't know the difference between saber-toothed tiger on the Serengeti and a triathlon local hometown sprint.
Yeah.
And so something about your perceptions about the race, like I have to win, or it'll be embarrassing if I lose, or I expect to do really well, and if I don't, something bad's going to happen. There are reasons why people get bad nervous. And so when I work with triathletes, I try to figure that out and get them to let go of the threat. Because the fact is, Travis, however I do in Ponte Vedra, I'm going to be okay. I'm not going to die. Yeah. Psychologically or physically. I'll be disappointed if things don't go well, but my life will go on. And so when you can relieve yourself of that pressure, that threat, you're not going to be nervous because there's no threat. You can just say, bring it on. And here's another little tip, simple distinction in terms of how you perceive a race. Do you perceive it as a threat or a challenge? A threat or a challenge? Threat, negative thoughts, physiological anxiety, fear, focus on everything that go wrong. And when you perceive something as a threat, what's the overriding motivation? Run away. Now, when I say run away, I don't mean you're at the start before the swim and all of a sudden you just throw your goggles on the ground and run out of there. It usually plays itself out in tentative or cautious performances. Okay. The other side of that is challenge. And challenge is you're not avoiding failure with threat. You are pursuing success. You're pursuing your best performance, positive self-talk, good energy, positive emotions, excitement, joy, pride, focusing on how can I just go as fast as I can. And the goal is crush it. So think about the simple distinction. Do I perceive this race as a threat or a challenge? It's not reality, it's perception.
Yeah.
So if you can shift to what I call it challenge mode, then it totally changes your psychology, your emotions, your physiology, and ultimately your performances.
It's really interesting. Now, I'm sure you've had a few people like this because I feel like sometimes it's easy to talk about. And like for me, I'm picturing myself like sometimes I have great positive self-talk and then all of a sudden I get to a race or some sort of big event or public speaking or something. And then all of a sudden I just start shutting down or I'm super fatigued for, I've overtrained and sometimes that makes making good decisions and being positive super tough. As there, people you've experienced that, no matter how much you train them, they really struggle to, overcome the nerves, deal with the anxiety. And then do you have some interesting techniques you try for that? The reason I thought of this is because I once heard about Leslie Patterson and how she would go into an alter ego before her races because nothing else seemed to work for her.
Yeah. Yeah. So certainly there are some athletes I've worked with over the years who they had so much baggage, so deeply ingrained habits that it was just super hard for them to change.
Okay.
And so in that case, I would actually have them emulate, like, give me somebody. And sometimes it was a superhero. There was one female Olympic athlete I worked with. It was like Captain Marvel.
Oh yeah.
The female version.
Yeah.
And she would see herself, imagine herself as her. So she'd see herself competing using imagery, and see that person. So in a way, what happens there is your persona is not working. So you're taking on another person's persona who's super powered.
Wow.
And that kind of thing can help. But at the same time, what I found is that putting in sufficient work and time, making the commitment to change, and making the moment to moment commitment to make good choices and take. I use this metaphor of forks in the road: bad road, good road. How often do we take the bad road? I don't know about you, but I take it more often than I'd like, for sure.
Same.
Choose to take the bad road? No. Why? Because it's the bad road, right? I feel bad and I do bad. And so a lot of my work is about helping people simply make choices in the moment. Like, okay, I'm going down the bad road. It's not going to serve me well. There's a good road that will be staying motivated, being positive, fighting for myself. That's the better road. I'm going to take that. And it's really hard when you've gone down that bad road for years.
Yeah.
But with time and commitment, they take the good road once and they go, wow, because the good road is self-reinforcing. When you go down the good road, you feel good and you do good. I want to do that again. So one thing that's really important to emphasize is that the human mind is unbelievably complex. And so you can't just do like basic stuff isn't going to work. And so sometimes you have to get really creative and look for ways to somehow give them just some sort of way, just a little bit of power to go down the good road. And in time and with support and some success, I've seen some athletes who were incredibly burdened with bad attitudes and low motivation and anxiety turn it around. And not only, of course, does it help their athletic lives, but more importantly, they're just happier people because, living on the bad road ain't no way to live.
Yeah. Man, I can't believe I haven't gone into this because as I'm talking to you, you're so passionate about this, and you've been doing this for such a long time. I feel rude not asking you in the beginning, how did you get into this in the first place?
Yeah, common question.
Yeah.
So as you indicated in your introduction to me, I was a ski racer, an alpine ski racer, growing up in New England. And when I was 13, I wanted to be the best slalom ski racer in the world. And I went to this boarding school in Vermont that was just for ski. It was created for ski racers, and it's had many Olympians and top U.S. ski team athletes go to the school. And I was always my own worst enemy, and I I lacked confidence, down on myself, and couldn't focus, tons of anxiety. And by the way, also when I was 13, I was 4'9", 89 pounds.
Wow.
So I had no place dreaming of being a world-class ski racer. But then one summer, I took this college course. This was, I think I was maybe a junior in high school. And it was related to a lot of the things that I do with athletes. And I took this course and it introduced me to positive self-talk and routines and breathing and mental imagery, incredibly powerful. And I applied all these things to my next race season, and career changing. I went from top 20 in the nation to from top 40 in the nation to top 20, made the US ski team, the bottom of the US ski team, won some races. But more importantly, it was like there was this major psychological shift in how I approach races. And so I got to college. I went to Middlebury College in Vermont, and I skied for them. And I took a psychology class. And there's a cliche that people become psychologists to figure themselves out.
Yeah.
And again, I was a total head case, and it turned my career around, sports psychology. And so I had a great professor in my freshman year at Middlebury. And the way I put it is that I didn't choose psychology, it chose me. And there was like no other choice. It was like, this is the road I had to go down. And so then I went to University of Colorado Boulder for grad school. I know that's where Sam went undergrad, Sam Long. Yeah. And been on this path ever since. And, Mark Twain once said, find something you love to do and you'll never work a day in your life. I feel absolutely blessed to feel that way, because I just love what I do. Yeah.
That's fantastic. All right. Well, give us some top training tips to train our mind. What are something that and those listening could start applying today?
Yeah. And some I've already mentioned briefly, but self-talk, okay. Especially when it gets hard. I suggest people create what I call power words, because basically what happens when you're struggling, either in a workout or in a race, you start feeling like you're losing power. You're losing the ability to control your body and tell your body what to do, go faster, or maintain your pace. So in the moment when you're struggling in a race or workout, it's impossible to step back and go, I'm struggling here. What are my options? What's the best path here? What should I do? Because your body is screaming at your mind to stop. Yeah. To stop, and you can't just turn your body off, and so you can't just make it up as you go along. Beforehand, sit down, come up with a couple of power words or power phrases, things that give you a sense of strength and power. Okay. And so, for example, I mentioned I choose to push my limits. So the last quarter of every workout, it's like, and I start to feel myself lagging, I'm constantly saying that. Another one, especially in the track and especially the last part of a race, dig deep and finish strong. And so it's like constantly in my mind, dig deep and finish strong. It's motivating. It generates positive emotions. It distracts me a little bit from my pain, and it reminds me why I'm doing it. And because the idea is that, let me save that point for a little later. So practicing your self-talk. And I suggest people write it on their handlebars. If you're on an indoor trainer, print it out and put it up on the wall. Yeah. Write it on your hand, because in that moment when you're hurting, it's hard to be able to go, oh yeah, I need to even grab my power words. But if they're right there, and you want to imprint those on your brain, so when the race comes, they just pop out. You don't need to think about it. You start to hurt, dig deep. I choose to push my limits, whatever it is. Yeah. So self-talk, power words. Second one, so absurdly simple, breathe. So this has a huge physiological impact, because if you think about our physiology, we have very little direct control over our physiology. We can't just tell our heart to slow down. We can't just tell our blood flow to change direction. We just can't tell our adrenal gland to start shooting out hormones. Yeah. One physiological activity we can control is our breathing. And so if you can just, even you're gasping, I remember in Hamburg in the mixed team relay, I was, the last quarter mile, I'm just dying, just gasping for air. But I reminded myself, because I practiced it, just take control of your breathing. And even when you're gasping, you can find some control there. And that does a couple things. It gets more oxygen into your system. It relaxes you. And importantly, it sends a message to your body that we got this. I'm in control. So your body doesn't need to go, whoa, I'm in the Serengeti 250,000 years ago. I need to stop. So a simple thing of building breathing into your training, conscious breathing into your training, and then on race day, have that come out. So breathing is hugely important. I suppose I can go on forever here, but let's just pick one more. Okay. Mental imagery or visualization, the most powerful mental tool there is. So the week leading up the race, and I've already started, once a day for the first 3 or 4 days before I leave for Spain. I'm doing the race in my head. And I haven't been there, so I don't know the course, but it doesn't matter. All I'm imagining is this is a world championship. And I see myself at the start feeling the way I want. I feel myself, and I'm not doing it for 35 minutes. I'm taking different segments of the race. So the first 100 meters of the swim, the middle part of the swim, approaching the stairs out of the water, seeing my transition, getting on the bike. What am I thinking? What am I feeling? Really realistic, like I'm hurt, but also keep pushing on the bike. I'm not very good. I'm not a great bike guy. So I need to constantly remind myself to push. And so it's like push. That's a power word for me there.
All right.
And then T2, the run, seeing myself finishing strong. And then leading up to the race, once I see the venue, I will 3 times, like I'm arriving Tuesday, so Wednesday, Thursday, Thursday, at least 3 times a day. I'm seeing myself do the race, the morning of the race. The race is until 4. So leading up to the race, do it a couple more times. I'm basically programming my brain to think, feel, and perform the way I want. So when I get to the race, I just run the program. It's not a choice. Do I ease up? Well, it's not even on the menu. It's just like I program my brain to go. And so with the pros, with the age groupers, that's a huge part of it. Mental imagery is like weight training for the mind. Yeah. And we could spend another hour just talking about imagery. Maybe we can do that at some point in the future. But basically, just closing your eyes, putting yourself in a setting, and seeing yourself perform the way you want.
I love that. I was just going to ask you kind of how you do it, and do you set time aside, or is this something you can kind of do when you're daydreaming driving, or stuff like?
Well, a little bit of
Not
both.
that you should be. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I'll do it when I'm driving,
okay,
or on my indoor trainer, or out for a run. But ideally, yes, take 10 minutes, lie down, close your eyes, a couple of deep breaths, and just take yourself through key parts of the race. How you want to think, what you want to feel. How you making it realistic, so you're hurting, but how do you respond to the hurt? Finish strong, dig deep. I choose to push my limits. Whatever you do, and seeing yourself competing, performing the way you want.
All right. Okay. Now this one is for those so much about positivity and positive self-talk and so many positive tips here. But for maybe somebody who's listening who's struggling, or his training's not going well. Maybe they're overtrained, maybe they got an injury, or or maybe just in a dark place and not even on the right path right now. How do you get out of that? How do you get yourself up out of the slump or deal with an injury, that kind of thing?
Yeah, so sort of separate things there. Being injured, I was hit by a car about 2 years ago, and I was out for about 6 months. And so I totally, and I work with a lot of injured athletes, and that's a whole nother very complicated topic. But basically, you got to deal with. Let's address that first of all. Yeah, it's easy to go into major depression when you're injured and you're not able to do the things you love. But you have to just first accept the cards, and also allow yourself to feel bad. It's like, my season's over. This sucks. Cry, feel bad, whatever. Eat all Ben and Jerry's you want for a day or two. But then get back to, okay, you know what? Assuming you're going to be okay long term. And what I found is that the surgical and rehabilitative technology these days, you can come back from major injuries. And plus, I've known athletes, some people who come back from, knee replacements at later ages, hip replacements, and they're still fast.
Yeah.
And so just focus on what you can control. So when I was laid up with some broken bones after being hit by this car, I thought, okay, what can I do to get better? And swimming is a weakness of mine because I didn't grow up swimming, and so I was able to swim. And so for literally 2 months, I was in the pool every day, and I was getting coached by Brenton Ford, effortless swimming guy, and I just totally changed my swimming, and I improved a ton. And I also did conditioning around the areas that I could. I couldn't do anything with my leg, but I worked on my core, my upper body. I worked on my mobility. I also did a ton of mental imagery because I wanted to keep my mind sharp. And the way to do that is your mind doesn't know the difference between real performance and imagined performance. And so I kept myself racing. And I did all the races that I did the year before and what I might do the next year. So I kept my mind sharp in that way. So that's the way, is just focus on what you can do to get better. Okay. And then allow yourself to feel bad periodically, because it sucks. As far as where you're just in a slump or you're not feeling good, the question I always ask is, where are you physiologically? Because as I said earlier, you can't be positive and excited when your body's down, because your body is literally depressed. I don't mean clinically, psychologically depressed, but everything's down because you're overtrained, you're burned out, you need a break, whatever it might be. So the single most important thing when you're in a bad place, when you usually aren't, is take some time off. And that's exactly what I experienced this past weekend. I mean, it was amazing. I took 48 hours off on Monday, back in the game, psychologically motivated, positive, excited. Yeah. And then, there's some athletes who they're just in a place and they've been this way for a long time. And then there's probably something psychologically going on. And it could be related to work, related to family. It could be related to the investment that they have in their triathlon. It could be stress related. And that's where hiring someone like me, I'm super busy. I don't need the work. But find somebody like me who can help you. And because a lot of times there are things that we don't know why we're feeling the way we do. And this is not only important for triathlon, but for just general mental health as well. And so if you just haven't been able to get out of this dark place for a long time, there's something going on, and it ain't simple. So get help.
All right. And last question on that, real quick, is triathlon I've seen and heard, personally seen too, is it can be too much and it can lead to negative things as well. And you've probably seen that a lot as well. How do we avoid that? Some good tips.
Yeah. So this is something that I've seen with athletes I've worked with, and I'd have to confess I've suffered with it a little bit.
Me too.
What often happens when triathlon becomes an unhealthy part of your life, it's because you're looking for something at the finish line that you never find at the finish line. And the problem is and this is sort of when I went through, I did a 5K, and everybody else was super happy, but I wasn't. So I just haven't run far enough. So then you do a 10K, same thing. Half marathon, same thing. Marathon, same thing. Get a triathlon, same thing. Crossing the finish line, I'm not finding what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
And that's when you get into 70.3s, and then Ironmans, then Ultramans, and it's like it never stops.
Yeah.
It's so important to understand that whatever you're looking for, and whatever you're looking for is usually like self-esteem, feeling good about yourself, happiness, joy, meaning. You don't find it at the finish line. You find it in the journey. It's a total cliche. You find it in the process. So you have to step back and go, okay, what am I trying to do here? And I'm looking in the wrong places. So it's like finding the joy, and it's not always joyful, but finding the meaning, the satisfaction of training, of getting on your bike, getting in the pool, getting on the road, having a community, a local triathlon club or what have you. Huge part of triathlon that I just love. Because again, I'm an introvert, so I basically do my own thing, but I love going to races because they're my people.
Sure, me too.
And I love connecting with them. And I know you know that feeling. And so being able to just pull back a little bit and take a look and go like what are my priorities here? What are my values? What do I really want to get out of this? And again, sometimes it's necessary to talk to a professional about it, because sometimes you can be so deep in it that you can't get out by yourself.
Yeah.
But it starts with recognizing is that this is not healthy for me. And I see this with people who overtrain, who try to train through injury, who don't give themselves enough recovery. And I don't want to mention too many names here, but Lionel Sanders. He's somebody, he's a whole nother conversation. He's one of my favorite triathletes. I have so much respect for him, but he keeps sabotaging himself. And he keeps doing things like before Kona last year, he didn't take a day off for like 73 days, he said. Excuse me? Anyway, I don't want to get off on Lionel, but I think he's an amazing guy. But so I think those are some things you can do when you see that triathlon is not a healthy part of your life, because the bottom line is we should be doing it because it makes us healthier, it makes us happier, it makes us feel more connected, it makes us feel more fulfilled. And so how do you go about doing that? And for some, it's just having fun. For some, it's participation. For some, it's travel. For some, it's just being out there with your buddies. For some, it's competing. So finding your purpose, your reason, what I call it, your why, the WHY, your why for doing triathlons. And hopefully the whys are healthy things, not like I need to do them. I need to feel better about myself. It's like it enhances my life.
So good. I think that's a good place to kind of pause on that, because it's such a wealth of knowledge you've shared with us, and I wanted to keep it a little bit digestible for those listening. But I do have my hot question that I always ask, and we're on to, who do you think is going to win in Pontevedra, and then also for the women's Kona race? Since I know you're such a fan of the sport too, and you follow it closely.
Yeah, completely. Well, now that we're first of all, obviously if Taylor Nibb's going to do Kona, and as you know, she's keeping it totally close to the vest.
Yes.
I have a feeling she's going to do it. She's, I would say, a prohibitive favorite, although, she obviously hasn't probably been doing the distance, so that's a question. But I think, Danielle Reef's always a possibility. I like Annie Haug, because obviously she's such a fast runner.
Yeah.
So I think the thing about predictions, they're like elbows. Everybody has them.
Absolutely.
And nobody looks back to see whether you were right.
Oh, I do. Yeah.
Oh, you do? Okay. So I better be careful.
Yeah.
And I'm I have a PhD in psychology, but I'm not a psychic. But I really like Annie Haug a lot. And Daniela, these days you don't quite know who's going to show up. So I'll go with Annie. And then on the men's side, there's no men's side for Kona, right? As far as Pontevedra, on the women's side, again, we're tail and nib free. There's such strong ones, and they're so balanced. Like Potter, Bogrand, Lombardi, Taylor Spivey, of course, is a big fan because Taylor and Taylor, they have great names. Sophie Caldwell looks good. So it's hard to say on the women's side because they're so balanced. On the men's side, I'm a big Alex Yee fan, partially because we're the same size and we're both sort of little guys, and so I try to emulate him. But he's also obviously been super strong this year, and his run is just astronomically fast. Hayden Wild is always in the game, although he's been a little off this year, I suppose. Berger, same sort of thing. Velaka has been strong. I guess I'll go with Yee just because it's obviously not a risky bet there, that's for sure. But yeah.
That's a good one. All right. Love that. There's a couple of guys like Yee and Wild and some of those younger guys who had a lot of success. They seem to have, and I've always thought this when listening to them doing interviews and stuff as well, man, they seem so mature, and they, it seems like that their mindset has really served them well in their career as young as they are.
Yeah, that's probably one reason why they are where they are at a young age, because they developed through, whether they worked with a sports psychologist or a mental coach, or they've just figured it out on their own. To perform at that level, they need to have that for sure.
How many athletes like them do you think are using sports psychologists? I know it's growing. Do you think it's quite a few, more than we expect?
It's hard to say. I've been sort of, as I've been at races and talking to different people, I've been surprised at how few do.
Okay.
And also just the way they do. Like I was talking to this one U.S. woman. I won't name a name, but she said she'd been working with somebody from the Olympic Training Center, but she didn't know her name. She didn't remember her name, and apparently they'd see each other like rarely. And it's that's like mental stuff. That's not real mental training.
Yeah.
And so what I do believe, though, is that as the stakes get higher, and they are getting higher in terms of more prize money and more celebrity and so on, the top triathletes are looking for every advantage. Because the fact is, Travis, as you well know, they all do the basic stuff. They all work hard, and they've all got their coaches, and they have their data, and they're all doing that. So that's not what separates them.
Yeah.
So one thing I really emphasize with the top guys and gals I work with is, how can you be different? Because if you do what everybody else does, you're going to be like everybody else.
Yeah.
And certainly, the Norwegian method, although that's a conversation I'd love to have with you at some point. They're doing some different things, and they've had some great results. And so what can you do that is different than what everybody else is doing? Because that's what's going to set you apart, assuming you have good enough genes.
Yeah, I think for a lot of the pros, maybe the coach becomes the psychologist a little bit. Yeah,
very much so, for sure. Yeah.
And I've heard, coaches like Brett Sutton, for example, they have their athletes do crazy things. Maybe, do you think that's partly psychology based, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Travis, a good coach is a great intuitive psychologist. They might not have the fancy degrees, but so much of what they do is psychological.
Mm,
But again, for me, what makes mental training is the structure. Just like what makes conditioning is the structure.
okay.
And so, and coaches don't often, rarely, if ever, I've seen have that kind of structure where they can really consistently strengthen their mental muscles the way they strengthen the athlete's physical muscles.
That's a really good tidbit. I think I've kept you long enough. I so appreciate your time. That just flew by. I couldn't believe it. That's the first time I've looked at the clock. Can we end on some rapid fire?
Go for it.
Awesome. All right. What do you love most about triathlon? And now it's rapid fire, so say it quick.
Yeah, I'm competing against the best and seeing if I can stack up.
What has been the biggest game changer for you in triathlon? It could be gear, or it could be something mental, nutrition.
Yeah, hiring a coach. Yeah.
Hiring a coach. Okay. Or an organized. And I know your answer to this one. And are you disorganized in anything?
No.
Okay. Wow. Interesting. Hip hop or rock?
Oh, definitely hard rock. I'm a metal guy. Def Leppard, AC/DC, for sure.
Love it.
Old school.
Do you listen to music before a race, for example?
No. The only time I listen to music is on my indoor trainer when I'm doing high intensity because I need it. It just motivates me.
All right. And so do you recommend to some people to maybe not listen to music on long runs, stuff like that?
Well, here's the thing. So there's this thing in psychology called state-dependent learning. And the idea is that whatever state you're in when you're learning something is if you want to express that after learning it, you kind of need to do it in the state you're in when you learned it.
Ah, okay.
Okay. Now this is a little bit maybe politically incorrect here, but a lot of the early research had to do with studying stoned. So the basic research said, oddly enough, that if you study when you're high, you should take the test high. And okay, disclaimer, I'm not advocating for that.
Sure.
But here's the thing. So music is an incredibly powerful mental tool. We all know that it affects us psychologically, emotionally, physiologically, and there's been some great research on it. The problem is if you use it all the time in your training, you become dependent on it. And then you get to race, and it's like, I don't have that external juice, if you will.
Sure.
And so I'm not averse to listening to music sometimes, especially for quality workouts, because it's just what you need to keep yourself going. But I think it's important to train your mind to not have that stimulation, because in a race you don't have that stimulation, and then you don't know how to keep yourself going necessarily. So I think that for some quality workouts, yes, but not all of them, because you also want to get your mind used to pushing it without needing the music. So as a general rule, I would say certainly on the long runs, rides, swims, try not to use it, and only use it occasionally. Let's say 3 swims, 3 bike, and 3 runs, quality workouts, 1 or 2 times a week with that. So get yourself used to just like having it self-generate, basically, because music is basically external juicing in a way. Yeah, but it's legal. Yeah.
Love that. All right. Pasta or pizza before a race?
Yeah, pizza for sure. I'm actually not a carbs guy. I don't eat a lot of carbs, and the research shows, especially for short races, carbs aren't that important. But for me, pasta, potatoes, rice, they're just delivery systems for the sauce. And so typically I'll have a pork chop or a piece of chicken or a piece of salmon with a salad.
All right.
And my coach, his name's Dr. Greg Rhodes. He's a Ph.D. in exercise physiology. He says that carb loading is vastly overrated, but it's part of the culture for sure.
Oh, it's so interesting. The guy I just went on the trail run, he says he eats his first meal at 7, and he's also so against carbs and everything. And here I was with 90 grams of carbs. So I've got a lot to learn about carbs still myself, but that's interesting. All right. Would you rather a sprint finish or dominate a race?
Um, Sprint finish because it's so exciting. And that happened to me at nationals in Milwaukee in the sprint, with a guy who was second the day before in the Olympic, and he beat me. And we came off out of T2 together, and we raced the entire way together. And he just had a little bit more at the end. He beat me by 7 seconds, but
Oh,
it was great fun. It was great fun. And I sort of blew it tactically. He followed me the entire way and then passed me when I should have stuck behind him. But lesson learned. But it doesn't happen very often in triathlon where you have a mano race against somebody.
yeah.
And a couple of times it's happened in my triathlon career. It's super exciting, and I haven't always won. Even when I didn't win, it's just like really fun because it's a race.
Absolutely. I love that. Same here. Swim, bike, or run, if you had to cut one out, what would it be?
Oh, swimming. Yeah. Which basically says, why aren't you a duathlete?
Yeah.
Because I didn't grow up swimming. I'm not a great swimmer. I'm one of the fastest runners in my age group, and I'm somewhere in the middle on the bike. But so it'd be smart if I was a duathlete. But I love the challenge of doing things that I'm not good at. And
Mhm.
triathlon's like the big event. And
Yep.
so if I said I did aquabike, people are like going like, what? But triathlon, everyone knows triathlon. And so part of that is that as well as like I want to be in it where the best athletes are there, and as I said earlier, I want to see if I can compete against them.
I feel the same way. Didn't grow up swimming or anything, but I feel like there are some swims. Do you feel this too, where you're just like, man, this is the best, or it's just like because you're underwater, it's quiet, you can think a lot. Do you feel that as well sometimes?
Yeah, well, yeah, when I was in Hawaii a couple of years ago, when I was just swimming in the open ocean,
Oh,
it's really kind of a beautiful thing. Um,
yeah.
do I experience joy when I swim? I've come to appreciate and enjoy swimming, but I'm not sure I experience joy because it's just struggle still. Yeah.
Fair, fair enough. All right. On that note, sharks or jellyfish if you had to swim through quite a few in a race?
Oh, I'll take jellyfish. And a little story. I don't know if you heard, but a triathlete was attacked by otters at this little lake where I have a cabin up a couple of hours east of San Francisco. And
Oh,
and the week before, and this was a second otter attack, and it was vicious. Like there was an article in Field and Stream about it, and they show pictures, and it's like gross. But
oh,
I had the week before I'd been swimming. I'd done 3 swims in this lake, and I knew the previous attack had happened. I thought it's not likely to happen to me, and I was fortunate. But literally a week later, same lake, this guy gets almost mauled by a couple of vicious otters. These days I'm not thinking about sharks or jellyfish. I'm thinking about otters, and I can assure you, I'm not swimming in this lake until they find a way to get rid of the attacking otters.
that's crazy. Oh my goodness. Wow. Yeah. And we saw a seal attack on Velasa we talked about
Right,
earlier.
right.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. So people have to look out for more than what they're used to. Well,
It's not our home. You know, what can you say? The water that is.
very true. Well, that's all my questions that I've got. Was there anything else you'd like to add? And then please do tell everybody where they can, follow you more or reach out to you, that kind of thing.
Yeah. It's interesting, Travis. I get interviewed a lot, and at the end they always say, "Is there anything you'd like to add?" And the sign of a great interviewer is, "I can't think of anything I can add."
Ah,
And we could go on, and there's so many different topics we could address. But for now, I think we've covered some great stuff, and hopefully people have appreciated what we've talked about. As far as reaching out to me, amazingly enough, in this age of the internet, I have a website, and it's drjimtaylor.com, drjimtaylor.com, and I'm on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and all the usual suspects. I'm not on TikTok, but people, if they want to learn more about what I do, and probably 95% of everything I've ever written is on my website for free. And so if you go to my blog, and I have a separate triathlon category, and I usually write something every week. And so people are free to go there and check out what I have to say.
perfect. I'm going to start following on there for sure. And a lot of those links will be down in the description. So thank you so much, Dr. Jim, for your time, and good luck in Ponte Vedra. Can't wait to hear how you do.
Very good. Travis, thank you so much. Really fun to chat and talk shop with people who are as passionate as I am. So all the best to you in the Daily Try, and I'll keep you posted.
Thank you so much. We have to do it again.
We will, for sure. Thank you.
Right. Before you all head out, I want to tell you a little bit more about Fuelin, the sponsor of today's show. Are you guys like me and sometimes you feel tired and depleted from training and racing? And do you know if you're fueling yourself properly to maximize your performance and recovery? I know before I started using Fuelin, I couldn't answer that for certain. But now, since using Fuelin and their amazing app, I feel so much more confident in what I'm doing. It takes out all the guesswork in nutrition and fueling. It'll save you time in the long run, and you'll start having much more energy for training and racing, but also you'll be recovering quicker and you'll be feeling much better in between. If you want to know more about Fuelin, please head to their website, fuelin.com, or give a listen to the Scott Tyndall episode with the One Moment Longer podcast. And if you do sign up, use my code TheDailyTri for 20% off your first month.